Welcome into the Gramlich and Lain podcast. We are doing our 2025 season recaps. We've got a lot to discuss with some of our big teams here in the ACC, and we've got to talk Virginia Tech. Maybe we'll focus a little more on the future here with Virginia Tech. I think all Hokies fans say thank you. But we have David Cunningham from Tech Sideline. He's one of the best, been covering the Hokies for a while. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me so much. This is awesome, and yeah, a lot to look forward to for the Hokies. Maybe not as much with 2025.
You know, it's part of the process, KG.
Yeah.
It's part of the process how we got here, Kelly.
That's right. I mean, it's all part of the story. And of course, it's so unique in so many ways that Brent Pry is going to stay and be the defensive coordinator, and we'll get into that. But overall, when you look back at the season, 3-9, 2-6 in the league, most games were not close. I think the Old Dominion loss was obviously the turning point in a lot of ways. What if you could kind of give us maybe one or two things? And we know that it wasn't, Brent Pry is still a very good coach. He's still on staff, and Virginia Tech fans love him for the way that he's been so loyal to Virginia Tech. But I guess my overall question is, why didn't it work with him as the head coach at Virginia Tech? What's your assessment of that?
I just think he didn't really have the players, and I think they had a really good team 2 years ago in 2024. You saw that with the number of guys in the NFL, including Lain, who was terrific for Washington this year. And when they tried to rebuild it, I just don't think they had the right pieces. The offensive line was a huge struggle for the Hokies for multiple years in a row. I don't think they ever really got it right. The linebackers, I don't think they really ever got it right. And I think a couple things here or there in terms of true positions, and then it all kind of bled together where you are coming off a season where you were okay in 2024. Expectations are you need to win, and you don't. And I think it quickly unraveled, it quickly snowballed. The second half of that Vanderbilt game, right before the Old Dominion game, you combine those two halves together, and they were basically outscored like 60-0 in two halves. And it just got downhill really, really quickly. Some personnel things, but I also think Pry, I think he's a great coordinator. I think you saw he just wasn't that great of a head coach. And as a result, Hokies went in a different direction. I mean, they had fired him before September ended. As a result, that allowed them to get the ball rolling on the whole James Franklin thing. But just a very unique situation because, somebody who travels, covers all the games for with the team, it's beginning of October, and it's like, yes, the games matter, but
Sure, it's like the season's over. Yeah.
at the same time, the season's over, and the coaching search is the bigger issue. Coaching searches are not supposed to be 2 or 3 months long, and they were, and this one took a lot out of me. But I think the Hokies are in a better place now as a result of they had to happen. What happened had to occur for them to get to this point.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question about that. And it was interesting that first game against South Carolina, who was, a top 15 opponent who everybody, myself included, thought was going to be really good. And you saw some signs of life. You're like, okay, it's not that bad of a loss. And then South Carolina went on to be what they were. And obviously so did Virginia Tech. But it really was that next week where Vanderbilt just hammered them. And you're just like, all right, this ain't it, that this isn't good. And then of course, to stack that loss with a very embarrassing loss, at home versus Old Dominion, it's just, you had to do it. Right. And I hate it because I do not like, changing coaches and, the middle of the season and the beginning of the season. I mean, it truly is such a strange thing and something that I don't think anyone wants to do, but you're right. It did allow the process to unfold the way it did. And I think, kudos to, everybody involved with that process and how they made it happen. So we know it was just a bad year is what it is. And I think a lot of great points there that you made about personnel and about going to getting people. And guess what? That is the head coach's job. And it's his ultimate role to be that guy and to be the GM, be the facilitator, be the recruiter, because it's all his program at the end of the day. And I think there is something to, what you said there about Coach Pry just not being that guy. Great coordinator, great coach, great linebacker coach, great dude, but not a great head coach. And that's hard. This is a new world where there's a lot more, put on them than just football. And so for me and for him to still be there, I love that. And I think it's really cool. And like Kelly said, we'll get to that in a moment. You brought up the coaching search and how crazy that was for you. Maybe, the first couple of days after the firing happened, and then the months that led to that, any inclination? Was it kind of in your mind, as soon as Franklin was fired, you're going to get him? Like, just walk through, I guess, your vantage point of that process.
Well, it was so early that it was very just strange because it's in the middle of the end of September and you've got 9 games left to play, and you put Phil Montgomery as the interim head coach, who did a terrific job rallying the troops, by the way. But coaching searches, again, are not supposed to be this long. And the weird part was, once James Franklin became available because Penn State fired him 2 or 3 weeks later in October, it kind of became interesting. That could be an opportunity there. But I don't think it was really until later in October, beginning of November, that it was kind of like, hey, this could work. I think there were a lot of names floated around. Virginia Tech put together a committee. Eddie Royal, who of course is on the ACC network with you guys, was one of those guys on that committee, along with Bud Foster, Bruce Arians, a lot of really smart people. And part of the thing that I think really helped Virginia Tech throughout this entire process was, in August and then September, Whit Babcock went to the Board of Visitors, the AD, and asked for more money. He basically said, we need more support from the university. And they approved it. The Board of Visitors approved it. We're talking $229 million injected into the athletic department. And what one of the Board of Visitors or search committee members, Ryan McCarthy, told me the day Franklin was hired was, we went down and met with James Franklin, Bud Foster, me, a few others. And when we walked into James Franklin's house, he had a note, an entire packet, basically an entire presentation from the BOV, detailed with sticky notes of like what he was interested to know about. You're talking a whole breakdown of Virginia Tech's upcoming budget, and here's where the improvements are going in. And James Franklin was so into it. We're talking 10 days after he was let go at Penn State. He wanted that Virginia Tech job so bad that he had detailed notes of, hey, here's where I'm thinking about this, right? And here's what I think the NIL budget should be. And very interesting how Bud Foster, Virginia Tech's obviously legendary defensive coordinator, kind of mended that bridge and said, hey, James, I can talk football with you throughout this entire process. And I think everyone on that Virginia Tech side really played a different role. And all of a sudden you get to beginning of November and it's, hey, this might actually happen. And it turned out really, really well. And Brent Pry, I think, had an interesting role to play too, because he could have doused that fire, doused that house in gasoline and burned it down on the way out. And instead, all he did was tell James Franklin the truth and give him the real opportunity of saying, hey, this is what you're walking into. And as a result, their relationship goes back 30 years. James Franklin decides to bring him back as the defensive coordinator, which is such a unique thing in its own. So a lot to get here, a lot of steps, but I think Virginia Tech positioning itself with the money, it allowed the opportunity for James Franklin, a coach of his caliber, to come to Blacksburg. Like, I don't think anybody really saw that, but part of it was, if you look back in July, Virginia Tech was not in the position to get a coach like that. You fast forward 2 or 3 months and you have the resources to go out and get a guy like James Franklin.
You read my mind, David, because that's where I was going next, the money piece of this. And I remember when all of this was announced, the $229 million and all of that, Mac and I did a show on it and basically said, Virginia Tech is serious again. They're realizing what it takes. And these fans have had enough, and the administrators have had enough. And I remember Whit Babcock putting out that stuff comparing Virginia Tech's budget to Miami, Florida State, Clemson, the people they want to compete with. What do you think? It had to be before this season, obviously, because that was all in the works. What do you think was the ultimate catalyst for Virginia Tech to get serious again?
Well, I think it's a lot of factors. I think the biggest thing is you compare what you want the football program to be in terms of how much money you are putting into it in this era where there's NIL and there's revenue sharing. And Virginia Tech looked at its peers and said, we are nowhere close. Now, part of it is you've got a school like, say, NC State, for example, that gets a lot of direct institutional support. Or even you look in-state at Virginia. Virginia gets a lot of direct institutional support more than the Hokies. And I think what Babcock said was, if we want to be in the ballpark to compete with our peers, let alone be better than them, we have to step our game up. And I think they sat down and simply looked at the numbers and said, it's not going to work from a budget standpoint. We need more money. I don't know that there was any one thing, any one instance, but I think they did a lot of thinking over the summer. A lot went into it, and they've got some people that have been at different places, of course. And Brent Pry obviously was at Penn State before, and people have seen it done different ways. And I think they really just had their eyes opened to what can Virginia Tech accomplish if we put all of our investments into this. And I think you get a coach like James Franklin who has hit the ground running and really like opening everybody's eyes to the fact that this is really possible. I think the Hokies have always been kind of known, especially under Frank Beamer, of doing more with less, and a coach that could win 10 games consistently without the best resources. Well, it's not those times anymore. You have to put money in, and you've seen it. And it's paid off already. You get a coach like James Franklin, you get the players you have. Virginia Tech had a lot of money to spend in the transfer portal, and you turn the roster around. And as a result, you're headed in a completely different direction than you were, say, this time last year.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
And David, I think it's interesting, like, who wants to be known for that? Like, oh, we do more with less here, awesome. Like, who's attracted to want to go? I guess blue collar, hardworking guys, but at the end of the day, that's just, I don't know. It sounds so crazy now, because I think you're right. And I think Florida State was that way for a long time. I think Miami was that way for a long time. And it's fascinating how those two absolutely have flipped. And now, Virginia Tech joining that party. I don't know the, details of the dates. Like Kelly said, maybe it did happen preseason. Maybe the thoughts were happening preseason. But I do have to think that once they fired Pry, there was that like, oh crap moment. We have got to get it together. Like, who is going to want to come here with no budget? No one. Who are we going to really be able to get without funding? And I think at the end of the day, that maybe have been the final heave to get that going. I don't know. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think that makes a lot of sense there. When you're talking about Franklin and the things that he's doing and hitting the ground running. I mean, to me, it was such a grand slam. I mean, as soon as he was fired, because we thought Clemson and Penn State were playing for the Natty. Like, everyone thought that was happening, and obviously it did not. When he came available, I was like, man, you have to go at him with everything you have. I mean, just because one reason, he's already been taking all of your talent, from the 757, from the DC area, and taking it to Penn State. Secondly, he's a heck of a coach, and he's a winner. Like, he's a great, great coach, and I think by far and away, the most qualified on the market at that time and even after that. And so I think just getting it done was so instrumental and such a huge thing, for Hokie Nation. We've done a million podcasts about that, about how excited we are with it. But I think this next piece is super vital too. And the fact that he did keep Coach Pry and that he is going to be the defensive coordinator, and that trust, that relationship. Now Coach Pry can literally sit up in his tower, draw crazy pictures of blitzing defenses, and just be a madman. I mean, I think that is an absolute grand slam. What were your thoughts when I guess that news broke, or you got wind of that kind of happening?
Well, it's weird. So James Franklin has his introductory press conference, right? And everybody's so fired up. This is probably the most energetic this fan base has been in a decade. And James Franklin is asked about Brent Pry at his introductory press conference, and he starts tearing up. remember, they go back 30 years. James Franklin was a quarterback at East Stroudsburg. He played for Brent Pry's dad. And so they have this relationship where they were together at Vanderbilt, then at Penn State. They just have this really tight bond. And I tell you what, guys, I have never seen a fired coach get as much applause from a fan base as Brent Pry, because they kind of like soft launched it in a little way. You know, we get the news kind of in early December that it's a possibility that, hey, he's serious. And I think the way James Franklin kind of phrased it recently to the media was, if I was going to go somewhere else, Brent was going to be one of my top options to follow me. So why not Virginia Tech? And it makes sense. Say he took for example, Arkansas job. He's probably taking Brent Pry with him to Arkansas, right? It's only weird because Brent's the former head coach. But I think James Franklin speaking about how much Brent Pry impacted him throughout the process and didn't necessarily push him towards going to Virginia Tech, but basically said, here's what you need to know. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, being open to building that relationship back up. I think it speaks a lot of volumes about Brent Pry, about who he is as a person, that he's willing to kind of take it on the chin a little bit and walk back into those meeting rooms with those players who he coached, he recruited, and say, I want to do this again with you guys, even though I'm in a different role, even though I'm not the head coach. Like, I just think about from my player's perspective how weird it might be to have a head coach gone, you spend 9 games without him, and he comes back in a completely different role. But James Franklin said when they introduced Brent Pry in a team meeting in January that it was a standing ovation. Yeah. So that tells you what the players think of him. So just a unique situation.
Well, and I think it's so interesting because it's not like it was toxic, right? Like, it just didn't work. Like, I think that's what is so different. Like, it's one thing if, man, this guy's a jerk, he's a terrible person, we we're free, now, right? That wasn't the case. It just didn't happen. And I think it's also a different light because, when you're a head coach, you're so removed, right? You're doing so many other things. And one of those is recruiting. So, these guys are recruited by this guy, but then once they get there, you probably barely see them, walking around practice or team meeting. But other than that, you're not really, directly football 101 impacted by that guy. And so now I bet they're over the moon. Like, this dude has so much knowledge. He's so creative. And again, to now just be able to do defense. And I don't know what his responsibilities are, off-campus recruiting, whatever. I imagine they're going to remove some of that. But the fact that he can just be what he is one of the best at in the world, that to me, if I'm a player, I'm jacked up.
It's such a unique situation. I don't want to say it's never happened because I'm not sure.
I don't think it has ever happened. Not this quickly, at least. I know some guys go back.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been that quick.
And I like the way you put it, David. If he had taken the Arkansas job, Brent Pry would have been his DC. So it makes a lot of sense. It just happens to be in Blacksburg. Okay, we did say this is going to be a lot of forward facing. So let's look ahead. I know spring ball probably hasn't even started, still in winter workouts. But Virginia Tech, like you said, has done some damage in the portal. That's for sure. One person that stands out is Ethan Grunkemeyer, the quarterback coming over from Penn State, who won the Pinstripe Bowl. And that game was hideous, but, it was a win. Just tell us more about him and what do you expect from some of these key portal pieces that you feel like can make a difference right away? Because that's the other part of this, David, is, okay, James Franklin's coming in. Expectations are going to be pretty high from the jump.
Yeah, I would say, to Virginia Tech fans, temper the expectations a little bit. You just won 3 games. It's an overhaul
Who
here.
was saying playoff next year? There were multiple people saying that. It may have been Eric McLean, but there were multiple people saying that about Virginia Tech in 26.
Listen, I just saw Kurt Signetti do what he did at Indiana.
True.
We can do it here in frickin' Blacksburg. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm not putting that on anybody.
I'm so curious once we dive into the weeds of spring ball and kind of see how this all pans out. I'm really interested to get a feel for this team. But you mentioned Ethan Grunkemeyer. This is a guy who he was thrown into the fire this year as a redshirt freshman at Penn State, and he played really well down the stretch. You're talking, if you compare his numbers directly to Heisman Trophy winner Fernando Mendoza in that game against Indiana, he went toe-to-toe, or even in QBR outplayed him. You're talking about a really, really smart, highly intelligent guy. And the other thing is, James Franklin brought his quarterback coach in Danny O'Brien from Penn State to Virginia Tech, and Ty Howell, the offensive coordinator. He's very young. I think he's in his late 30s. But he's a guy who has been with James Franklin, sees eye to eye with him for a very long time. And he's kind of got the reins now. And they both talked about it last week, how they're on the same wavelength. I think they're going to use Grunkemeyer in favorable situations, very much like they did at Penn State. But he's got talent around him. They brought in 30-plus players. I look at the offensive side of the ball. They took a couple tight ends. Luke Reynolds was a really impact player at Penn State. Defensively, I look at Javion Hilson. He's a guy from Missouri he was a 5-star prospect out of high school. And he didn't really do much at Missouri this year, but I think the Hokies are very, very excited. You got to pick your poison a little bit here because they took so many people. I look at the defensive back room and I go, they kind of completely overhauled it. They brought in a guy like Jaquez White, who was at Troy, I believe. And he's a guy who was a second-team All-Sunbelt pick. So they brought in some impact players here and there. The quote that stood out to me, guys, more than anything was James Franklin said, when he got here, he did not think he wants to build a 3 deep at every position. He did not think he basically had a starting group at every position. And he thinks now that they've got a starting group, a second group, and then a group of, in that third level, kind of young players who they feel pretty optimistic about. But in their mind, they have completely reshaped this roster. That's a long way from, the team that just went 3-9 last year.
No question. And I think it's, you didn't only see it in the transfer portal, but also in these high school guys, right? And the old fashioned way, going and getting commits, from high school. So just seeing what young guys are going to be able to step up and, really make some noise here. Last thing for me, man, just kind of looking at this schedule and, just the importance of the start. I mean, that to me has been our biggest issue, with Virginia Tech. It seems like for the last at least 4 years, just coming out of the gates hot. And obviously you have VMI, you have Old Dominion at home, and then you've got a couple of tough road games just in a Maryland team that probably is going to be pretty good. And, a Boston College team going up there, conference play, who knows what, they'll kind of look like. Are you kind of with me? Is there a piece of this schedule for me? Again, it's just getting the party started. Is there somewhere else on this schedule that you're looking at like this is going to be a really valuable, kind of important time here?
I think they have to start fast because if you look at their schedule come October, come November, I mean, they end with at Clemson, at SMU, home game against Stanford, and they've got at Miami and Virginia. What, like, the ACC did them no favors down the stretch, but as a result,
ratings. We're trying to give you more money. You're welcome.
And I think the Hokies play a couple Friday night games. Be very interesting to see the James Franklin effect in terms of viewership because that's such a big piece now. But their back half of the schedule is very difficult. The front part is maybe a little bit easier. BC Pitt, that Franklin Narduzzi game I think is going to be really intriguing. Yeah. But they have an opportunity to get off to a very good start, especially in non-conference. Maryland not great under Loxley right now, a little bit of hit or miss. You have the opportunity to start, 3-0, I think 4-0, you go up to Boston College, get off to a good start. And I think that energizes the fan base, that rallies the fan base. And I think you will see I think that's good that it's backloaded because it gives Virginia Tech an opportunity to find itself. Eric, you think back to that 2023 season. Hokies ended on a high, but it took them forever to figure things out. And it's like, if they can get their act together quickly this year under James Franklin, new head coach, new OC, new DC and Brent Pry, if they can kind of be a cohesive team by the end of September, I think that bodes well for them, going into that long stretch of ACC play.
Rollback just dropped their licensed game day collection. Polos, hoodies, Q-zips, custom designed for your school. On game days, we wear Rollback, period.
This team starts 4-0 with all the excitement and the hype with James Franklin. Oh my goodness.
Playoff train. Full steam
Yeah, it's
ahead,
going to
baby.
be exciting, David. And you're in midseason form, by the way. Very, very good stuff from our friend David Cunningham. My last thing here, and you mentioned a little bit fan base, all that. Mac and I love this fan base. We think this fan base deserves great things because they are great. And what's your feel just around Blacksburg? I feel like I know the answer. I mean, everyone seems to be so excited, but imagine they do start 4-0. The vibes around there and just the vibes in Lain Stadium are going to be ridiculous.
I think you are seeing the impact already in donations.
And
Like-
that's what matters, right?
Yes, yes, but there is a James Franklin effect. Eric, you talked about James Franklin. This is who he is. He is a CEO and he is a recruiter. He recruits everybody. Like he's doing a hit on the ACC network in the middle of a basketball game, or he's going out on the court during the women's game, and he is constantly recruiting. That is who he is. And you see it because there is a unique energy around Blacksburg, a special energy around Blacksburg right now. Now, you've got to win to keep it going, but I think this fan base is more energized than probably in the last decade or so.
Come on.
Which is what you need. James Franklin brings special energy to this place. And I think he is already pushing and doing things behind the scenes that Virginia Tech has needed for a long time. For example, the Merriman Center. It has been a kind of a shared building of sorts with a bunch of different departments. He has basically pushed and is turning it into a football-only facility. He hasn't been here 90 days and he's already pushing people out of buildings of sorts. And what Babcock's, the AD, spoke the other day about to David Teal about just construction that's going to go on, how they're going to expand buildings already. That's the James Franklin effect, right? It's not always nice and pretty, but he's going to push people around and do what's best for his program and what's best for Virginia Tech. And I think from the fan base perspective, you love it because he's bringing in highly touted recruits. A lot of the portal guys they picked up were guys who they recruited originally out of high school that their staff felt very confident about. A guy like, for example, Eric Mensah, a Northern Virginia kid who went to Ohio State, was previously committed to the Hokies, is now coming back to Virginia Tech. Getting those in-state guys back. Heartwarming stories. I think they've completely overturned the roster. And then you look at just the excitement, the opportunity to get off to a really, really good start. This fan base is energized again. It's exactly what you needed. And if you had told me, looking back to like September after that Old Dominion game, that like, hey, this Virginia Tech program come February is going to be, off and rolling under James Franklin, and they're going to have a top 25 high school class and a top 30, portal class. Like, really? But
what?
But all these pieces kind of had to, all these pieces kind of had to fit together really, really well. And I think you've seen that. And I'm excited just to kind of get hands on and during the spring because. And get to know these players and get to know these coaches because I think they're going to have a really, really special season. They've got the opportunity to, at least. They've built something really, really cool. And I know Virginia Tech fans are kind of just licking their chops like, oh my gosh, like we're going to have a good football team again? It's kind of crazy to think about. The last time Virginia Tech played in an ACC championship game was 2016.
Long time ago.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, they deserve it. And I know they're so excited. And you say in 10 years, but most excited since Liz Kitley and Georgia Amore took the Hokies to the Final Four.
Of course.
That's what she meant. That's what he meant. So anyway, hey, David, this was super fun, man. Thank you for your time. As you can tell, we're a little excited.
Yeah, you got us hyped up now.
Hokies.
We're ready.
And I think it's only made it worse talking with you. We got the fever, baby. Let's go. So we're super jacked up. Grateful for your time and can't wait to see what this year holds.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me, and got to get you guys to Blacksburg, hopefully, for a big-time game.
Please. I haven't been there in a while. I need to be back.